so I don't forget it. All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our weekly press conferences, week 4 of the 2026 legislative session. So we are just about a third of the way through. Of course, it's great to see you all here. Thank you so much for joining us. Also pleased to be joined today by Senate President Pro Tem Malcolm Augustine, Senator Hedelman, Senator Kramer, and Senator Brooks. We are going to be finished by the party of Bens today. I appreciate them being here and also the continued leadership of Maryland Senate, where we have had yet another productive and busy week. Over the last several days, as many of you all saw, 2 key pieces of legislation, important pieces of legislation related to ICE and immigration enforcement in Maryland were passed through the Senate. What we know is that these bills reflect Maryland values and American values to make sure that we are protecting Marylanders against a lawless administration and immigration enforcement that shocks the conscience. We also passed a Maryland Voting Rights Act and our special election bill. This is continuing our commitment to protect access to the ballot to strengthen our democracy when it is under threat. As we do every single week, our legislative goals have remained clear. We are focused on growing Maryland's economy, lowering costs for working families, and protecting our residents from the harmful and reckless policies of a federal administration. Along those lines, in just a moment, you'll hear from my colleagues who will provide an update around our work on affordability, particularly where it comes to housing and healthcare, 2 issues that remain top of mind for families across every single part of our state. As part of our affordability package, I am proud to sponsor a bill that will make it easier for Marylanders to comply with the new Trump administration work requirements for people on Medicaid. Let's be very clear about what these work requirements are built to do. They are built to throw people off of health care. They are built to make people uninsured. We know that that is a way to drive up costs for those individuals, but importantly, it also drives up costs for all Marylanders who have insurance who end up taking on those costs for those who do not have insurance when they show up for medical care at the hospital. 90% of the adult Medicaid population is either already working or unable to work. So in fact, imposing these work requirements is very clearly geared towards throwing them off their health care. The legislation that I'm sponsoring will make it easier for Marylanders to fulfill these new burdensome requirements. It will create job training and volunteer opportunities through a new database that will assist Marylanders in fulfilling these work requirements, giving them much needed and critical health care. At a time when we already see healthcare costs going up and through the roof because of actions at the federal level by the Republican budget bill and other reductions to healthcare access, we know that people's budgets are stretched way too thin, and we need to make it as easy as possible here in Maryland to ensure that people can retain their healthcare. Before I pass it to my colleagues, I want to thank my fellow senators. As everyone knows, this was a very, very challenging week with extended debate on critical and consequential legislation. And while, of course, there is strong disagreement on a variety of issues, I am incredibly proud that the state of Maryland continues to be a place where we debate vigorously and we do it respectfully and thoughtfully, because that's what Marylanders deserve. At the end, we're able to come together, even with disagreement, to move critical legislation that will have immediate positive impacts for our state. The thoughtful and collaborative work of our standing committees and the seriousness that our members bring to this process are what make this institution of the Senate of Maryland targeted and effective in the way that we work. Each week, we'll continue to highlight the important new legislation that, of course, fits within our important agenda for this year. So with that in mind, I'd like to turn it over to our Senate President Pro Tem, Senator Malcolm Augustine.
All right. Thank you, President Ferguson. Senator Malcolm Augustine, here definitely to talk about, as Senate President mentioned, affordability and lowering the cost of living for Marylanders. They are being squeezed, as you all know, from literally every direction. Housing, energy, healthcare costs are rising faster than paychecks, and it's just something that we must do something about. And I'm going to talk a little bit about a piece of legislation I'm working on with regard to housing. You know, less than half of Maryland households can afford a median priced home in our state. Home ownership remains the single greatest tool for building generational wealth and financial security. So what we're going to do, we want to increase housing supply across our state. We want to reduce regulatory and administrative barriers to building new homes, and we want to expand options so families have real choices, create more pathways to home ownership for our working families. Now, currently, Maryland is a late vesting state. You may ask, okay, well, what does late vesting state mean? Well, what that means is that local jurisdictions can change land use rules and requirements for housing developments, projects, up until visible construction, like when you see things coming out of the ground. Regulatory changes can be made even after permits or approvals have been granted for projects that were in full compliance with local laws at the time that they were proposed. This regulatory uncertainty makes building houses in neighboring early vesting states, such as Virginia, Pennsylvania, more attractive than building in Maryland, and ultimately results in higher housing costs for Maryland families. And the second piece that I want to talk about is local impact fees and development excise taxes, which serve as an important role in funding infrastructure improvements. But requiring these fees to be paid upfront can meaningfully increase the cost of a housing project, as the initial startup budget of a project is often financed. The additional financing costs associated with upfront payments of these fees lead to higher rents and sale prices for Maryland residents and can be the difference between viability and non-viability of a housing project. So regulatory uncertainty and development fees contribute to the higher cost and low availability of housing in Maryland, in turn placing higher financial burdens on our residents. Now, working in the interim with Governor Moore's team at DHCD, led by Secretary Day, we have developed legislation that will be a tool to combat this reality and help increase more supply that will create more affordable options for hardworking Marylanders. Senate Bill 325, Maryland Housing Certainty Act, increases certainty by locking in local regulations at the time a housing development project application is submitted. Local regulatory authorities may not change the rules by which an applicant is approved or denied after it is submitted. Once approval for a housing and development project is granted, the builder has a vested right to the authorized use and development for at least 5 years, given even if zoning laws or regulations change in the meantime. In other words, once a project is approved, approval cannot be withdrawn because of a zoning change made after the approval. Vesting development rights upon receipt of a complete application does not restrict local jurisdictions from duly adopting zoning or other land use changes. It merely allows projects to be approved and move forward based on the laws and regulations in effect at the time the application for the project was submitted. The second provision of the legislation defers the collection of development fees and excise taxes until after construction is complete. Deferring collection of impact fees from builders until after construction is complete reduces upfront expenses and carrying costs while still allowing the local jurisdiction to fund necessary infrastructure improvements. By charging the fees to a completed income-generating property rather than requiring the fees to be financed while the development is still in the planning stages, we reduce the costs for that project. The results: more regulatory certainty and more affordable homes for Marylanders. Of the 18 states that currently have early vesting statutes on their books, 7 of them are ranked by new housing permits in the past. They have far more housing permits. The impact fees, deferral of the programs in other states have been shown to substantially reduce upfront cost burdens for housing projects, which encourages more production of housing and ultimately leads to lower rent and sale prices for Maryland households, making our housing more affordable. I now will turn it over to Senator Hettleman.
Thank you very much, Senator Augustine. My name is Shelley Hettleman. I'm Senator from District 11 in Baltimore County, and I'm very happy to be here with you this morning. The federal student loan landscape is undergoing the most volatile changes in decades following the passage of H.R. 1 in July of 2025. This legislation, combined with the court-ordered phasing out of the SAVE plan, has effectively gutted the previous repayment framework. While it's expected to be replaced with a system defined by longer loan forgiveness timelines and much stricter administrative hurdles, many student loan borrowers are currently caught in the netherworld of purgatory, waiting. Marylanders have more student debt than most other Americans, unfortunately. At over $37 billion, the average student loan debt in Maryland is just under $44,000 for the nearly 850,000 Maryland student borrowers. That's over 13% of state residents. The immediate crisis facing Maryland borrowers is one of administrative limbo caused by unprecedented federal backlogs and litigation. The Department of Education is currently struggling under a backlog of over 800,000 income-driven repayment applications and more than 80,000 public service loan forgiveness buyback requests. Many student loan borrowers rely on these plans to be able to afford their monthly payments and to eventually emerge from their debt. These individuals are trapped in various forms of forced forbearance, where they are legally prohibited from making standard payments while the federal government slowly processes their paperwork or litigates the end of the SAVE plan. Moreover, in March, the Trump administration officials terminated nearly half of the staff at the Department of Education, including many of the people who assisted borrowers. This federal paralysis creates a direct conflict with our law, which currently requires tax credit recipients to spend down their full credit amount within a strict 2-year window or face a total clawing back of the funds. The bill I'll be introducing, the Student Loan Debt Relief Hardship Act, would serve as a necessary state-level shield against this federal dysfunction. Under the current system, a borrower who receives a state tax credit but who is placed in a federal processing forbearance is essentially penalized for the federal government's inability to process their debt or respond to their issues. If that borrower spends all but a fraction of their credit due to these delays, for example, $950 out of a $1,000 tax credit, they're currently required to pay back the entire balance of the credit, the $1,000 instead of the $50 in the example I just gave, creating what is essentially an all or nothing cliff. This bill would eliminate that trap by establishing a hardship waiver, thereby allowing the state to pause the clock on the spend down requirement for any borrower stuck in SAVE litigation, the income payment application backlog, or a delayed public service loan forgiveness buyback agreement. The bill also addresses the mathematical reality introduced by H.R. 1's new repayment plans. Because the anticipated new plan may result in lower required monthly payments, many borrowers may find it impossible to spend their entire tax credit within the allotted time without making unnecessary extra payments to the federal government. By shifting the state's recapture policy from a total clawing back to a prorated model, the bill ensures that borrowers only return the specific portion of the credit they were unable to use. It's only right that we provide relief, reassurance, and peace of mind to Maryland student loan borrowers, and that they will not be penalized for the Trump administration's chaos and confusion. Thank you. And now I'd like to introduce my colleague, Senator Ben Brooks.
Thank you, Senator Hedelman. Good morning, and thank you all for being here. And thank you, Senate President Ferguson, for your leadership this session, focusing on growth, affordability, and protecting against some of the devastating policies of the Trump administration. For the record, I'm Senator Ben Brooks. I represent the 10th Legislative District in Baltimore County, serve on EEE, and I chair the Executive Nominations Committee. I'm proud to stand before you this morning as a sponsor of Senate Bill 267, that's the BAMBI, which stands for Building Affordably in My Backyard. Yeah, at the core, BAMBI is something very simple and very urgent, making sure that working families, seniors, young people, and essential workers can afford to live in the communities they sustain. Across Maryland, we're facing a housing affordability crisis that is pricing people out of their opportunity. Teachers, nurses, first responders, hospital workers, and young families are being pushed and further away from their jobs, their schools, and their houses of worship, and their support network. We all agree that we need affordable housing. But too often, when it comes time to build, we hear that familiar refrain, not here. BAMBI changes that conversation. The bill says yes, right here, yes to smart growth, yes to inclusive community, yes to housing that reflect the real economic diversity of Maryland. Building affordably in my backyard is about removing unnecessary barriers that prevents affordable housing from being built where it makes sense, most sense, near transit, jobs, schools, and services. It promotes responsible development while respecting local character, infrastructure, and community input. Importantly, BAMBI does not impose reckless or one-size-fits-all mandates. Instead, it creates clear, fair pathways for affordable housing to move forward, cutting the red tape that often delays or kills projects that communities actually need. The benefits are real and far-reaching. BAMBI helps stabilize families by keeping housing costs within reach. It helps local economies by ensuring workers can live near where they work. It helps seniors age in place, young adults put down roots, and it helps Maryland meet its climate change, transportation goals, and reduce sprawling with long commutes. Let me be clear. Affordable housing is not a threat. It's not a threat to our communities. It's a strength. It brings vitality, stability, and shared prosperity. It means children can stay in the same school. It means neighbors can remain diverse, resilient, and economically strong. BAMBI also reflects a broader principle. Housing is not just a market commodity, it's a public good. And when the private market alone cannot meet the need, it's our responsibility as policymakers to act thoughtfully and decisively. This bill is about fairness. It's about opportunity. It's about ensuring that Maryland remains a place where people of all income can live, work, and thrive. I want to thank the advocates, the local leaders, housing providers, and residents who have worked collaboratively to shape this legislation. Your voices makes this bill stronger. SB 267 is a step forward toward solutions instead of stalemate, toward building instead of blocking, and toward a Maryland that truly works for everyone. I urge my colleagues, community partners, and stakeholders to join me in supporting BAMBI, building affordably in my backyard. Thank you. And now I'll call up my colleague, Senator Kramer.
You didn't approve the message.
Oh, my name is Ben Brooks, and I approve this message.
Well done. Good morning, folks. I'm Ben Kramer, and the good people of Montgomery County have sent me here, so they're to blame. I'm here to discuss a couple of bills today. The first one relates to unemployment insurance. Now, I am one of the appointed members to the Joint Committee on Unemployment Insurance. That's right, feel my pain. Joint Committee on Unemployment Insurance. But I take the job seriously, and we have a serious problem. Our Secretary of the Department of Labor has been cautioning over the past 3 to 4 years that we are getting close to having an insolvent unemployment insurance trust fund. Well, we are now on the precipice. We have in place very much outdated policies with regard to our unemployment insurance. And if we remain where we are right now at just a little below 4%, 3.5% unemployment insurance, the trust fund will be insolvent in 1 to 2 years. If we continue to see the implications of the Trump administration ravaging our federal workers, our federal employees, and all of the private contractors in the state of Maryland who have been doing business with the federal government, and if the Trump administration economics push us toward a recession, our unemployment trust fund could be bankrupt within the year. So I appreciate the fact that President Ferguson has recognized how critically important it is that this year we take action to stabilize our unemployment insurance fund. Pardon me, because folks, this is the lifeline for so many of our Maryland residents who lose their employment through no fault of their own. This is their lifeline to stay in their homes. This is their lifeline to put food on the table. It's their lifeline to make their car payment and their car insurance payment. This is their lifeline to their daily needs that all of us have. It also keeps our economy here in the state from collapsing when we have a COVID disaster and suddenly tens of thousands of people are out of work, in need of this benefit, which goes right back into our communities and helps keep our grocery stores open for business, our convenience stores, every place people do business. That's where the unemployment benefits go, right back into the community. So with passage of this bill, we will make a small tweak to the taxable wage base, which has not been changed in this state in over 3 decades. 1992, our current taxable wage base was put in place. We are now in the bottom 10 of the states in this nation with regard to our taxable wage base. So in order to keep our unemployment insurance trust fund from going bankrupt, we will make that slight tweak. But we also know we have a responsibility and an obligation to our residents who, once again, lose their employment through no fault of their own, because we're going to increase the maximum weekly benefits afforded a resident who needs to take advantage of this benefit. We have in place right now a weekly benefit that has not been changed since 2010. Inflation in that period of time, cumulatively, has gone up 49.5%. This does not put food on the table where we are right now. This does not help people cover those payments they need. So we have to be respectful of ensuring that the year 2026 reflects 2026 prices. So we'll be making that slight adjustment as well. And with that, we're hoping and should be able to prevent the bankruptcy of our uninsurance trust fund. The second bill that I have, I will preface by reading to you an email, just a couple of paragraphs, of an email I received this past September. And it reads, Senator Kramer, as the only Montgomery County Senator on the Senate Finance Committee with health care and insurance jurisdiction, I would like to inform you of a very serious situation with my granddaughter's health in light of the United Healthcare, Johns Hopkins debacle, and disintegration of coverage agreements. She suffers from celiac disease and a much more serious condition, chronic pancreatitis. She has been under the care of a doctor at the Pediatric Pancreatic Center at Johns Hopkins and may need a very complex surgical procedure. The procedure and post-hospital care would cost several hundreds of thousands of dollars in out-of-pocket liability and can only be performed by a very few number of surgeons in the United States. None are in Maryland with the exception of Johns Hopkins. Similar situations must apply to many other Marylanders. Well, folks, he was correct. It applied to thousands of other Maryland residents, and this was just the first of the many contacts I had with people who suddenly found, through no fault of their own, they are paying their premiums, that they no longer had coverage. And what was so important about this particular debacle is that many of these people were being treated at Hopkins for cancer and for rare diseases where they could not find health care elsewhere. So, to the credit of our outstanding Maryland Insurance Commissioner, Marie Grant, and Associate Commissioner, Jamie Sexton, whom I reached out to immediately following receipt of this email and all the others that came subsequently, they were able to step in and ensure, at least on a temporary basis, that these people were cared for. But then we spoke afterwards and said, how can we ensure going forward that we are doing our very best to prevent this from happening again? And with that, and with their help and assistance, and with passage of Senate Bill 521, we will enhance oversight mandates that carriers with regulated health plans inform the Maryland Insurance Commission of potential significant network changes prior to their effective date. It requires insurers to provide earlier, clearer notice to patients and the state when provider contracts are at risk of being terminated. The bill creates a 90-day special enrollment period for those who buy individual insurance. And the bill also provides mandates that for a period of 90 days following a debacle like this, they cannot terminate the insurance to their patients. The bill provides for some other important remedies, but we are looking out for the very best for Maryland consumers and for their health care. And with that, I will turn it back over to the Senate President. Thank you all.
Excellent. Well, thank you all, and thanks to the senators who are joining here today. As you have heard, it is focused on the core issues that matter to Marylanders: housing, healthcare, affordability. Fundamentally, that is what each of us is hearing when we are in our districts from our constituents every single day. With that, we'll open up to questions.
For Senator Kramer, you're talking about increasing benefits and solving a problem with unemployment insurance. A recent audit identified that the state overpaid benefits to the tune of about $750 million, money that it was unable to claw back during 22 months of the current administration. A lot of these benefits are paid for by businesses, including small businesses, that then goes out to people who lose their jobs. How do you justify potential increases to employers at the same time that the state is not being a good steward of $750 million in money? And what trigger provisions are going to be in there to ensure accountability of the system so that business owners know that when their money is going into the state, it's going to people who actually need it?
You are absolutely correct that we need to ensure we have in place the appropriate mechanisms to ensure the benefits are deserved and earned. This goes back to the COVID era, and at the risk of being political, it did begin with the prior administration and considerable problems with the entirely new computer and software program that had been installed by that prior administration just before the COVID hit, and the system collapsed for a period of time. The system was not functioning at all. The entire unemployment division within labor had, during that same administration, been slashed dramatically. So we did not have the staffing in place to deal with the huge demand on the system. And I believe that our current administration has been very prudent in trying to now catch up on a lot of it was carryover, and a lot of it could not be clawed back because of the timing on it.
But respectfully,
So-
I mean, the audit, the legislative auditor's office identified a 22-month window in the current administration where they had the ability to claw that money back and didn't, and now now they are time barred from getting that money back. So despite the facts of like if you stipulate that there were problems in the previous administration, the current administration still had the opportunity to recoup taxpayer $750 million of essentially taxes.
And in all due respect, they have been able to claw back a lot. Having said that, because of what they stepped into in those first 22 months, they have not had the ability to catch up to all that had occurred before they arrived. I agree that at this point in time, we have had enough time that going forward, we cannot have this happen again. But there is absolutely no question that a big part of that is a consequence of what this administration inherited. And it has taken them time to fill the vacancies that they inherited and to make the appropriate changes to and a big part of it was the computer and software systems that came in during the prior administration and proved to be somewhat of a disaster.
Mr. President, question on 287G. Does it look like it could be going to the governor's desk by next week?
That's our plan. Judicial Proceedings Committee took up the exactly cross-filed and same form bill yesterday, and so the plan is that we'll have it on second reader early next week, and hopefully we'll have it to the governor by the end of the week.
President Ferguson? Oh, go ahead, sir. On the legislation to help with the Medicaid work requirements, that's just for the Medicaid program, right?
Yeah, and largely focused on the expanded, the Affordable Care Act that expanded Medicaid coverage for those above 180% of poverty.
So, just out of curiosity, with SNAP facing some of the similar challenges under HR 1 and also with the air rate deadline kind of approaching and how they're going to base it off of 2025 and 2026, do you see any need for legislation that would also help with the SNAP program to kind of get it in line?
In many cases, we do these jointly, and so if there are efforts to keep people on the Medicaid rolls, that will also roll over to SNAP beneficiaries. And so it is the same thing. It is health and food. And so a lot of these qualification efforts are done at the same time. They're co-identified.
If I could just build off of
Sorry.
could you kind of describe how you see this bill actually working? I mean, it's a job training connection program. Kind of what does that vision look like?
Yeah, really, at the end of the day, it's about lowering the barriers to making sure that those who are now faced with these new burdensome requirements have access to programs that are in close proximity. What we know is that folks who fall into this population often have other barriers that are challenging, be it transportation issues or housing needs. And so the easier we can make it, the less friction between the requirement being in place and them being able to participate in a program. And so we're looking at things like Service Year and Service Corps and additional programs that exist, but reducing the friction and requirements for them to participate so that they can calculate that work requirement and demonstrate their qualification to continue the beneficiaries. We actually currently, the Health Benefit Exchange in Maryland has done a really remarkable job trying to integrate systems between the Department of Labor and Department of Health. Half the time, it is less about somebody actually doing the work, and it's more about them being able to demonstrate that it has been done. And so part of the bill is about showing these efficiency gains so that it is not on the beneficiary to retroactively go back and prove what they have done, but proactively ensure that government is acting in a forward-facing way to make sure that they don't lose the benefit.
Just so quick on that, sorry. Do we have an idea of the fiscal note on that?
We have not received the fiscal note yet, and it's in final drafting now. Hopefully will be dropped by Monday, and we'll get more details as they emerge from DLS.
So, Mr. President, I'm surprised nobody's asked this yet. Your response to Senator Ellis's remarks on the floor yesterday, you want to vote on redistricting?
Look, I have a deep respect for Senator Ellis. We've worked very well together on many, many issues. He's a very passionate individual, an amazing veteran and father. I have a great deal of respect. We've had this conversation a great deal in the caucus over the last several months, in groups and in larger settings. The Senate as a whole, the strong majority still believes at the end of the day that while we have fundamental agreement that what's happening at the federal level is unconscionable, in this moment in time, we have to do whatever it takes to ensure that we do not go backwards. And we cannot pass a map that leads to ultimately a 6-2 result. The timing, the constitutional structure here in Maryland is the basis by which we came to this conclusion. And so that has not changed. We cannot risk losing representation in this moment with this federal administration. And so that risk is just simply too great and would be absolutely a travesty were the courts to determine that Maryland's map had to change.
And if I could follow up on that, you've also said that it's generally not the practice of the Senate to vote on a bill if it doesn't have the support, as you believe is the case in this one. But given the high public interest in this matter, why not let everybody say where they stand?
Certainly, everyone is more than welcome to say. What I will say is that why this matters, and I think is difficult to explain because it gets into the weeds, but it is very important on this matter in particular when it comes to redistricting, because in all redistricting cases, the law is very, very, very important. And in the past, when there have been challenges, subsequent challenges to redistricting maps, there is the doctrine of latches that says you cannot bring a claim against a map if it has already been used in a prior election. Unfortunately, if you then start to change the map, you ruin the state's ability to have that defense about latches. Right now, what's most important is we cannot lose representation in Maryland to Congress. If we were to move forward, each new step we take, each new legislative step undermines this doctrine of latches that puts our current 7-1 map under threat and in jeopardy. And so that's the difference here that is different than almost any other issue, is that the litigation around redistricting is incredibly important. And so as we evaluate moving forward, we have to stick to the basis that we cannot jeopardize our current map, and anything that we do to potentially jeopardize it, we have to avoid.
Okay, but I understand your argument. This is the last question I have on this, but why not allow senators to register a red or a green and show to the public where they feel about this?
Even if someone were to take each new legislative step undermines in a proportional way the state's ability to defend the current map under the doctrine of latches. And so at the end of the day, that's a major reason why we have to make it clear we cannot risk losing another representative to Congress. We have to focus and prioritize on the things that we know that Marylanders are most concerned about, which is a lawless Trump administration, finding ways to grow despite that administration, and making sure that Maryland is more affordable. It's why we're talking about healthcare. It's why we're talking about housing. It is what people are scared about right now in Maryland, and we have got to do practical, tangible things that we know are not just about messaging, are about getting things done for Marylanders.
Mr. President, Senator Ellis made some very serious allegations yesterday when he was talking to the press about intimidation, fear of retaliation. do you have a response to that?
You know, look, certainly, I look forward to having a conversation with Senator Ellis. I have a great deal of respect for him. I don't know why he perceived that in any way. I don't agree with his assessment of conversations. And at the end of the day, I will certainly have a conversation with him to make sure that that I understand where he's coming from. I can tell you very clearly, this is not a matter of intimidation. This has been a deeply researched, trying to understand in this important moment, what is the best way for the Maryland Senate to serve Marylanders? And it's to deliver on the things that we know matter. Protect where we have representation in Maryland. Make sure that we are passing policies that protect against a lawless administration and immigration enforcement. Find ways to grow our economy where we are lagging behind other states, and make sure that we can make Maryland more affordable in healthcare, in energy, and in housing. We're doing all of those things, and I truly look forward to working with Senator Ellis moving forward on these core priority issues, and I know that we will.
Mr. President, on Senator Ellis, he had said yesterday that his form of protest would basically be to not vote in quorum, and I understand that that is against Maryland Senate rules, and so I'm wondering, is there some kind of like reprimand or punishment that would come from that? I know we don't see things like this very often in the Senate.
No, I don't entirely understand. If someone is present in the room, they are present for quorum, and so that will be that has been the standard. It continues to be the standard moving forward.
We could do one or two more, guys.
Mr. President, do you believe that the proposed change in the juvenile charging law is going to make its way to the floor?
You know, look, there were some really important hearings that happened. I think this is an issue that we're taking a very, very close look at. Most particularly where we are focusing in is where those young people who are charged as adults who are in adult facilities. The more I've looked through the data, the more that I've spoken to Chairman Smith, what we know is that when young people who are charged as adults are put into adult settings, even if it is segregated setting with in solitary, the results are worse for those young people. Time works differently for teenagers. 6 months to you and I feels very differently to a 15, 16-year-old. And while, of course, there has to be accountability for bad acts, we cannot continue to perpetuate a system where we have objective evidence that shows that putting a child in a space that has a negative outcome for their long-term development and their long-term success, we have to find a way to move away from that. Of course, it's complicated. We have to do it thoughtfully and have the right spaces with the Department of Juvenile Services, but this is something that we're really looking closely into to understand if there's a way for us to move forward to really protect young people. And here's the thing. These are issues where we have the authority right now today, regardless of the Trump administration, where we have the ability to act to make sure it's in the best interest of young people and in Marylanders overall. That is the work that we're trying to prioritize, is things that we know we have control over, that we can have the hard, difficult conversations to work through the nitty-gritty of complex policy details to move work for Marylanders. And that's where the Senate is going to continue to spend its time.
We can do one more, guys.
Senate Bill 2 also had its first hearing yesterday. It's obviously House Bill 1. It's a major priority to lower ratepayer bills, but largely there's some pushback from the Republican caucus that it may not do enough. Just curious about your stance on that bill moving forward.
Look, we have to look more deeply into it. I think we are going to probably move forward a very similar bill. I don't think it's enough. I mean, I think that it is a step. I think that as we see corporate profits skyrocket at the same time that utility bills are skyrocketing, there's a mismatch of incentives, and that has to shift. That is not nearly close to what we have to deal with, which is the larger energy generation and supply problem that is really the core of the issue in Maryland. And so that doesn't mean we shouldn't take on this issue of compensation, but it does mean that we really also as well have to take on the core energy market challenge that we're facing.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senators.
Thank you all very much.